Well, admittedly, the Wartime Era was kind of a slog to get through. And honestly, a lot of the movies in there had me questioning whether this Disney marathon was even worth continuing. But I stuck it out. You want to know why I stuck it out? Because the Silver Age was waiting for me. I mean, the Wartime Era had a lot of very uninteresting and boring films, half of which I've completely forgotten about. And even the one that I consider to be actually good still isn't even that great. But the Silver Age, now that era has like 5 masterpieces in there. Like, seriously, I don't even think this era has a bad movie. That's something I can't say about any other Disney era, even the Renaissance. And I will talk about that in a future video. But right now we're ranking the Disney Silver Age. All 8 films released from 1950 to 1967. So this ought to be fun. And remember, I have a lot of nostalgia for a large number of these movies, so maybe take this list with a bit of a pinch of salt. And, again, I don't really think there's a bad movie in this era, so let's do this. In last place, The Sword and the Stone. After watching through this era in a little over a week, this was the clear answer for which film was going to be in last, because even though it's not bad, like, I like Merlin. I really like Merlin, in fact, and I like his owl. I think Wart is a decent enough protagonist, despite the fact that his voice changes very sporadically throughout the film, but yeah, that was just kind of weird to me. But anyway, yeah, even despite those good things, this still is a huge disappointment, especially considering the films that came out right before and right after. This was sandwiched between like 2 of my favorite films of this era, and it's just not that good. I mean, why would you call a movie The Sword and the Stone only to not have the titular Sword and the Stone show up until like the last 10 minutes? How does that make sense? The pacing in this movie, it is rough. It is very rough. Like, this movie just really drags in a lot of areas. The villain of the film, Madame Mim, despite having a good song and a fun personality, is like just thrown into the third act for literally no reason. It's like any of the other wizarding shenanigans that happen in this film. The budget is so obviously low that it hurts. The animation looks really cheap because of this. All the backgrounds look very stiff and just not very expressive, if you know what I mean. And then they reuse multiple shots throughout the course of the film. And I mean, this movie had a budget of $3 million. That is a shockingly low budget for a Disney film. And this was at a time when they were doing really well. Like, Walt Disney was still around. Like, it wasn't like the Disney Dark Age, the era after this, where they were in serious financial trouble. No, but seriously, this movie just looks really cheap. The songs are all completely forgettable. Completely forgettable. So yeah, but I wouldn't say it's a bad movie, and it's certainly not the worst of the Disney films. It's just not that good compared to the rest of this era's output. So, yeah, unfortunately, it does sit in last. Number 7, Lady and the Tramp. I don't really have a ton of big issues with this movie, aside from the Siamese cat song, and wow, that is bad. Like, that song isn't really inherently offensive, but for some reason they decided to make it so with the instrumentation and the designs of the characters and the voices of the characters. Not to mention, it's just bad musically speaking. But aside from that, I don't really have any big problems with this movie. I mean, it's fine, I guess. It's just kind of forgettable. Like, I don't remember a ton about this movie, whereas the next, like, 6 films on this list I remember a whole lot about. Even The Sword and the Stone I remember more about than this film. That said, the characters are good, the animation is really nice, the score is great, some of the songs are pretty nice, like Bella Notte, that's a good song. The spaghetti scene is really cute. The climax is solid. This movie also contains one of the most terrifying rodents I've ever seen in a feature film. So, yeah, it's a good movie. Not one I'm likely to rewatch all that often or remember all that often, but it's good. It's solid. Number 6, Alice in Wonderland. This is hardly a flawless film. Like, the first half hour really, really drags, mainly because there's some uninteresting characters that Alice interacts with. Like, the White Rabbit and the Dodo are fine, and the shrinking and growing shenanigans are pretty solid, but the stuff with Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and especially the singing flowers, which, like, bored me to tears, that stuff I did not really like. The songs are really forgettable, which is weird because this is a movie that feels like it deserves great songs and it just kind of doesn't have them. Not to mention the Queen of Hearts doesn't show up until like the last 20 minutes of the movie, which is a little odd considering she is the main villain. So that is weird. However, there is so much raw creativity in this movie that I can kind of forgive these faults because it's just so weird and so bizarre. And I love that Disney was able to get this crazy. I think Alice is a great protagonist and a great audience perspective. And there is a ton of great side characters here. The White Rabbit, the Blue Caterpillar dude, the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, the Queen of Hearts. Even though she's only in the last 20 minutes of the movie, she's still great. Oh man, and all the scenes with them are really, really fun. The animation in this movie, good lord, it is eye-popping. It is just insanity incarnate. So, yeah, this is just such a film that is filled with artistic merit that, despite its flaws, I think it still holds up really well. Number 5, Sleeping Beauty. I have one big problem with this movie. No, sorry. 2 big problems with this movie. Aside from that, it's great, but the 2 big problems are big problems. Aurora and Prince Philip are such bland characters. Like, seriously. They are so boring. Aurora just dances around all happy and like, and who cares? And then Philip, I guess he starts out as kind of interesting, but at the point in the film when he's most important, when he's fighting Maleficent the Dragon, he doesn't speak. He doesn't speak for the entire last hour of this film. What is up with that? So, yeah, those 2 characters bother me. Everything else about the movie is great. I think the fairies are phenomenal. They actually have really solid comedic timing, which one wouldn't expect from a film that came out in like 1959. But still, they're great. And they prove to be actually successful guardians to Aurora. Maleficent. Oh man, is she awesome. Like, seriously, Maleficent like held the record for the greatest Disney villain for almost 40 years. Until the Renaissance, and I am going to talk about that in a later video. But still, she's so awesome. She doesn't even have a really good motivation. The reason she's doing all of this is because she wasn't invited to a party. That shouldn't be good motivation, and would normally be a detriment to the character, but it's not, because she's so awesome. Man, I love this character. And then they butchered her in that stupid live-action movie, but we don't talk about that. The animation is stunning in this film. Like, it just has this great style to it. The character design is phenomenal. The imagery in this movie gets really dark, and I love it. I especially love the scene where Maleficent is leading Aurora to the spinning wheel, and Aurora's, like, just sitting in a room all sad and stuff, and then you see this, like, really dark silhouette of Maleficent standing in the fireplace, and she's just standing there all solemn like this. I can't do it justice here because I'm not Maleficent, but still. That shot always horrified me when I was a little kid watching this movie. And honestly, it still kind of creeps me out to this day. Like, on my most recent viewing of the film, I was terrified of that. I was like, ugh. It's creepy, and it's awesome, and I love it. Oh, man. This is such a good movie. It has its flaws, for sure, but it's still great. Number 4, Cinderella, the classic Disney film. It has flaws, for sure. The prince is really boring. The most significant thing he does in this entire movie is yawn. And he marries Cinderella, but that's like in the last 5 seconds of the film. Who cares? He doesn't do anything in this movie. I mean, he speaks, and he actually shares a scene with Cinderella, which is more than I can say about the prince in Snow White, but still, it's basically a non-existent character. Like, he's a presence. I don't know. So, yeah, and there's a couple story problems, like, why doesn't Cinderella ever ask who the fairy godmother is? Is she just accustomed to random elderly women showing up in her yard? What's up with that? Why does the Grand Duke send armed horsemen after Cinderella with swords? Does he want him to kill her or something? And then, like, so, yeah, there are story problems in this movie. What if some other maiden just happens to have the same foot size as Cinderella? Did they ever think of that? But it's still a really good movie. I mean, I love it. The characters are great. Cinderella is a really good protagonist, which is weird considering at the time Disney wasn't known for making super interesting protagonists. Like Sleeping Beauty, Aurora is shockingly uninteresting. But with Cinderella, you really feel for her. You feel her pain. You understand her struggle because you see everything that she's going through. And she's a relatable character. She's not just nice. She has limitations. She's mildly impatient at times, despite the fact that she deals with all this crap for, I don't know, however old she is. They never tell you how old any of these Disney princesses are, huh? Apparently Snow White is 14, which is really, really concerning. But anyway, so yeah, Cinderella is great. The mice are really fun and entertaining. I really like the King and the Grand Duke as a comedic duo. They're just hysterical together. I especially like the scene where Cinderella first shows up and she starts just dancing with the prince randomly, and the King's like leaning off the balcony and he's yelling, "Lights!" That was funny. The comedy in this movie holds up really, really well. The songs are really good. The animation is good. The villains are awesome. When they're talking about Lucifer the cat, who just relishes in misery. The stepsisters, who are just the worst. Like, they're just such jerks to Cinderella. Or Lady Tremaine, who is so terrifying that she can turn her eyes yellow and darken a room around her when she has an important revelation. This lady is creepy. Like, seriously. Everything she does in this movie feels really grounded, which is weird because it's a movie that includes talking mice and random elderly women showing up in front yards to give people dresses and make carriages out of pumpkins. Like, she feels like she could be a real person, which is what's kind of scary about her. Because she has so much control over Cinderella, and she just makes her do all this stuff. She watches her suffer with, I don't even want to say glee. I don't even think she's capable of feeling glee. So, I love the stepmother. I think she's terrifying. And seriously, that scene of her, like, closing the door on Cinderella after she finds out that she's the one who danced with the prince, her eyes literally turn yellow. And it's like, she didn't actually do that ridiculous laugh thing, but still. I love this movie. It's such a great example of classic Disney at their best. Number 3, 101 Dalmatians. Now, before I rewatched the entire Silver Age, I had this at number 5, below Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. And upon rewatch, I discovered that not only is it better than those movies, it's just great. Like, I don't like this annoying little fat puppy, but who cares? He's not even in the movie that much. But seriously, this movie is great. The story is told in a really well-paced fashion. The main characters and the side characters are all awesome, especially like this little cat dude and our two main couples. The movie is hilarious. Like, it doesn't get enough credit for how funny it is. The comedic timing here is just spot on. Cruella de Vil is a psychotically terrifying villain. Like, I was never as scared of her as a lad as I was of, like, Maleficent or Lady Tremaine or, like, Ursula from Little Mermaid. But she's still insane. Like, that scene where she's, like, poison them, drown them, bash them in the head, got any chloroform? That scene is terrifying. I didn't know what chloroform was at a young age, but seriously, she freaks me out, and she's awesome. And then her henchmen, Jasper and Horace, are just really great. I mean, they're so lazy, and they're so hilarious. The animation is stunning, and it's not like even these big castles and stuff like in Sleeping Beauty. It's just these simple little details. The character designs are great. It's just a great movie. The score is great. The songs, for the few that there are actually really good. So yeah, it's a great movie. And it holds up really well. Of the two dog movies that Disney did in this era, this far and away completely blows Lady and the Tramp out of the water. So yeah, great film. Number 2, The Jungle Book. Before certain other films came around, I think this was my favorite Disney movie, as a lad, that is. It's such a great movie. I mean, there's not a lot of tension in the middle of the movie, which I noticed on my most recent rewatch, and that is a bit of a hindrance when you get into it, but it's still a phenomenal film. The characters are all so memorable, like, from Baloo and Bagheera, the elephants, the vultures, inspired by the Beatles, and just everyone in this movie is so memorable, to the point where, like, Mowgli, the main character, is the least memorable of them. And Mowgli's still a great character. The villains are phenomenal. Shere Khan doesn't show up until late in the movie, but he still has a presence. He's a threat, aside from in the middle, which is a little bit of an issue for me, but still, he's awesome when he shows up. The voice is great. Kaa is voiced by Sterling Holloway, the original voice of Winnie the Pooh, and he's great. King Louie is hilarious. And then get into the songs. Oh my god, like, either the songs in this era were not great, a mixed bag, or some combination of that, but every single song in this movie is awesome. Like, Bare Necessities, I Want to Be Like You, the Vulture song that I've just always really enjoyed, the elephant one, that I just love this movie. The voice acting is honestly top notch, and maybe the best of this entire era. It's really funny. The animation in this movie is lush and gorgeous. So yeah, I love this movie. It's such a well done film, and it was the last one that Walt Disney actually got to see when he was alive. So, Walt, well done, my man. I tip my hat to you. But number 1, one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, Peter Pan. No movie that I have ever seen incites so much childlike wonder and amazement in me. Like, I have so much nostalgia for this movie. I watched it all the time when I was a lad. I used to read this old storybook that was like this big. It was a honking book, but it was amazing. I had this is going to make me sound like really old, but I had a cassette tape of this movie, and I can distinctly remember certain parts of that cassette tape. That is how long I have loved this movie, and honestly, nothing has changed. It's one of the most It's one of the best Disney films I've ever seen. The characters are all great. Peter Pan, the perfect embodiment of troublemaking youth. The Darling kids, John, Michael, and Wendy and them, they're great. Tinkerbell is kind of a villain, but she goes through a really strong character arc. Captain Hook, one of the funniest Disney villains of all time. Heck, one of the funniest movie villains of all time. Mr. Smee, hilarious. The Lost Boys are fun. The comedy and the physical comedy, especially in this movie, is totally on point. Best of this era, no question. The voice acting is great. Hans Conried does the voice of Captain Hook and Mr. Darling. And good lord, there is no one with a voice like this guy. He's just awesome. The animation is absolutely mind-blowing, especially for the time. 1953 this film came out. The songs are all great. And even the what makes a Red Man Red song, despite the, let's say, questionable treatment of the Native Americans in this movie, especially like the characterization, that's a little uncomfortable. But I still love the movie. The score. Oh my god, the score of this movie is amazing. Like, seriously, it's just such a masterpiece that I can't get over. It's easily in my top 5 Disney movies of all time. I have loved it since I was a lad. And again, nothing has changed. So, yeah, it's my number 1 for this era. Alright, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I will be getting to the Disney Dark Age next. So, yeah, that ought to be fun. And then the Renaissance. I'm so excited to do the Renaissance, guys. Like, it's going to be really fun. So, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe. And as always, remember to keep calm and watch out.